Hi everybody, I'm going to be talking about the first half of chapter 3, which is focused on conception and genetics and heredity and stuff like that. Okay, so when we're talking about actually conceiving new life, development starts at conception. So there's a sperm and an egg, and they come together and they create an entirely new individual. So there's the sperm and the ovum, and so that's the male and female sex cells, and they combine into one new cell, which is called the zygote. And that's how fertilization works. The sperm moves through the cervix to attach to the ovum. The book also spent some time in this chapter talking about multiple births, so twins, particularly obviously fraternal and identical twins. So dizygotic twins are when they're conceived with two different ova and two different sperm. So they're not any more genetically related than regular brothers and sisters who are born at different times. On the other hand, monozygotic twins or identical twins, the ovum actually splits, and so they're from a single zygote. So they are genetically similar, which is, of course, why they look more alike, and they have to be same sex. So you can't have a cell that splits and is two different sexes. So a male and female twins are always dizygotic twins, fraternal twins. Okay, anything else I wanted to add about that? Oh yeah, one other thing is that, and I think the book had the statistic, was it 76%? It was in the 70s. So like over 70% increase in the number of multiple births, so twins, triplets, things like that, starting from like the 1980s. I mean, that is a huge increase in the number of multiple births that we're having in our country. And so basically the reasons for that are that people are deciding to have children later, and because it's harder for women to conceive as they get older, they are using more technology, so fertilization, in vitro, things like that. And when you do those procedures, there's a higher likelihood that you will have a multiple birth. So that is sort of like why we've gotten to that point. I just thought it was really interesting that the percentage increase was so high, because I didn't realize that. All right, so talking about genetics, so chromosomes are these, like it says, coils of DNA, and they consist of these smaller segments called genes. The complete sequence of all the genes in the human body is the human genome. When cells divide and they make a mistake, it's a permanent alteration, and that's referred to as a mutation. So this is not something that I think that we'll be talking necessarily much about throughout the rest of the semester, but I think it is helpful to like hear the terms. So if they do come up, we have some understanding of what's going in our bodies at a genetic level, to have some conversations about development. So what determines sex? Basically, at conception, the zygote receives 23 chromosomes from the sperm and 23 chromosomes from the ovum. And 22 of these pairs of chromosomes are not related to sexual expression. However, the 23rd pair are sex chromosomes, and you get one from your father and one from your mother. And that determines what the zygote is going to, what sex they're going to develop into. And actually, I think I have a, yeah. So this picture is also in your textbook, but I really liked it, so I put it on the slide. Um, so basically, the mother can only give X chromosomes. That's what she has in her body, so that's all she can pass on. So the sex is determined by the father and what he passes on in his sperm, because he has the ability, because he's XY, to pass on either the X chromosome or the Y chromosome. And so if he, as you can see in this picture, if he passes on an X chromosome, and then she's definitely getting an X chromosome for her mom, so then you're going to have a girl. And with a boy, the mom is still passing on the X chromosome, but if the dad passes on a Y, then that's where the genetic boy will come from. So, a genotype is, well, actually, the slide starts with a phenotype. So, a phenotype is an observable characteristic in a person. So, this would be something like, also something that you can measure. So, something like height, I can measure how tall you are. I can observe a person walking by and see how tall they are. Hair color, things like that. A genotype is sort of a collection of genes that are responsible for different traits. And those can be expressed or unexpressed characteristics. Multifactorial transmission is where you have more complex traits that are a combination of genetic and environmental factors. So intelligence is an example of this. Basically, you have a certain amount of ability, intellectual ability that you've received from your parents that are in your genes, but it is multifactorial in the fact that your environment also affects how much of your intellectual ability you are able to develop. So, you know, if you go to a very rigorous school and you have a lot of tutors, or you just have a lot of opportunities to do music or different sports and activities, things like that. So it's both of those factors working together. So they're basically what we talked about on Tuesday about nature versus nurture. This is it. The multifactorial transmission. It's both and. So genetic and chromosomal abnormalities. Most birth disorders are actually rare. As the slide says, it's about 3% of live births. They are the leading cause of death in the United States for infants. The most prevalent is Down syndrome, and then that's followed by cleft lip or palate. Basically, chromosomal abnormalities are typically due to missing chromosomes, or there was an error in the cell division, something like that. And so 40%, 40% of people with intellectual disabilities in the United States is from Down syndrome. So definitely the most prevalent abnormality that we see. When we're talking about heritability, there's this term there, so concordance. And this is when we're talking about the tendency of twins to share the same trait or disorder. And how we think about that is we look at twins, so twins that were raised in the same household, and then twins that were separated. So we call those adoption studies, because we know they have the same genetics, but they grew up in different places. And what is the likelihood um, that they're going to have a particular trait or disorder if they were raised in a different place, because then that means that there's a higher genetic probability that it's inherited. So an example of this would be schizophrenia. They've basically know from looking at twin studies that if you are a twin, a monozygotic twin, so an identical twin, you and your twin has developed schizophrenia, there's a 50% chance you will also develop schizophrenia. So they don't know what genes are sort of triggers the schizophrenic response or disorder, but we know that there is a genetic piece because of these twin studies. And I believe, if anybody's curious, the rate for siblings or fraternal twins, it's lower. I think it's like 25%, maybe 30%. Don't quote me on that. But I know for sure that for identical twins, it's around 50%. There have been several studies that have shown that. And so basically, developmental scientists often regard heredity and environment as intertwined. So again, nature versus nurture, it's both of them. They do have some of these other terms called a reaction range. So this is talking about how variable can a particular trait be based on the environment. So what that means is, let's take height. If both of your parents are tall, there's a good likelihood that you're also going to be tall. But there's going to be a range. You're going to be, let's say you're not going to go higher than 6 feet. And you're probably not going to be lower than 5'8", whatever range. And that's kind of like the range of variability. So that would be the reaction range. It's the likelihood that this is the range you're going to be in, but there's going to be a cap to it that you aren't going to exceed. And then the same thing similarly, so for the canalization, that is basically thinking about traits as canals, and some of them go really deep, and that means that they are pretty solid and that there's not going to be as much of that reaction range. And it's very limited. So again, thinking about height, we have not seen anybody who is 10 feet tall, right? Nobody is 2 feet tall. That's not any part of a normal reaction range. Yeah, and then there's some examples on there of what I just used height. And then lastly here, researchers have identified that genes and heredity play a part in some particular aspects of being a human. So we do know that there is a genetic piece of obesity. We know that also the environment does affect all these things, but we know that there is at least a piece of it that is genetic. Intelligence, I already talked about that. Academic achievement is going to be related to that. People's personality traits, so being introverted or extroverted or aggressive or shy, all of those things, they think that there's a genetic link to that. Temperament, same thing. So yeah, that's I'm going to stop there because it's the first half of the chapter, and I will make sure you get another video with the second half. But I hope this kind of explains some of those terms and gives you just a little bit of an idea when we're talking about the body and heredity and stuff like that.